Good news is the Blue Jackets finally won a hockey game. The bad news is basically everyone is injured. We're going to talk about the win over Philadelphia. We are going to talk about the Blankenburg injury, the Werenski injury, the Gudbranson injury, the Voracek injury, the Corrali injury, the Kent Johnson injury, some call-ups, and probably talk a little bit about Connor Bedard because it looks a little bit like that's where we might be heading this season. So we're going to talk about all of that and more on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you news, stories, sometimes fun, sometimes bad. Today it is mostly bad, I'm afraid, about your favorite team on mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also over on YouTube. So if you haven't hit subscribe over there, then feel free to do so. We're going to be starting our prospect coverage or our 2023 draft coverage a little bit earlier than expected, I think, because of how bad last night's game was. I just want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And where this podcast is going to start is with the good. Honestly, the Blue Jackets won a game last night, ended their 5-game losing streak, against the Philadelphia Flyers, which honestly, I am unsurprised that it went this way. I also would have been unsurprised if it had been the exact opposite score. Blue Jackets won 5-2. Two of those were empty netters, so realistically, it was a 3-2 win. But goals from Johnny Gaudreau, 2 goals from Boone Jenner, a goal from Nick Blankenburg, and a goal from Zach Werenski. So I believe that was even on the power play, but I might be incorrect about that. It was not on the power play. I thought it was. It must have been just after. But the point is, lots of good news in terms of who's scoring. Goal from Werenski, I believe his first or second of the season. A goal from Gaudreau, his 6th of the season. Weirdly, he's only scored home goals so far this season. He's only scored a nationwide, which does make me laugh. 2 goals from Boone Jenner and a goal from Nick Blankenburg. So one of the Jenners and the Blankenburg goal were both empty netters, but hey, they still count. Boone Jenner's up to 4 on the season. Blankenburg is that's his 2nd of the season, and honestly, overall, a pretty good game. Lots of good things to talk about in it. The Blue Jackets, I thought, competed for the full 60 minutes. The first Flyers goal, the Tony DeAngelo goal, I really feel like it could have been a goalie interference call. I don't pretend to know what goalie interference is any more than the average ref, because it is just kind of a let's spin the wheel and see what happens, but they didn't call it. I thought personally it could have been a goalie interference call, but the Blue Jackets came back to win the game anyway, so I'm not super mad about it. Jonas Korpisalo, I think, might have been my first star of this game. He made 32 of 34 saves. It's only his 2nd start of the season. I thought he was fine against the Avs in Finland, but this was a really, really solid game for him. His first win since January of 2022, I believe. And then he proceeded to then not win a game until he went out with an injury in March. So, it is what it is. But I really liked his game. I thought he was collected. I thought he was calm. He looked very much like the Jonas Korpisalo that we saw in the first post-Bobrovsky season, where this for better or worse was his. He got the All-Star vote. Do I think that he's magically managed to turn it around after 3 or 2.5 middling seasons? No, but it was really, really good to see peak Jonas Korpisalo last night, and he's going to need to be on his game because the Blue Jackets lost some more players in this game. We're going to talk about that in a minute, which is going to finish off. The Blue Jackets continued strong face-off percentage, 52.4% on the night. I assume that most of that is Blue and Jenner because that's just kind of how this goes at this point. Brennan Gaunce was at 72% for his faceoffs. He made his season debut, had 1 assist on, I think, Nick Blankenburg's empty net goal with that faceoff win, which was really fun. With the additions to injured reserve, I think he's probably going to be getting some more ice time, which is great. I like Brennan Gaunce a lot. Hilariously, Patrick Laine must have taken literally one face off and won it. Yeah, 100%. Sillinger and Jenner both sitting at about 40 to 45%, and Jack Roslovic sitting on 40%. So really, I think Brendan Gaunce was the guy that was carrying the face-offs in this game, which is very funny to me. But for the most part, Blue Jackets, I thought they played well. Power play did not garner any goals, but I thought it looked better. We'll see how it goes now that 2 of the best offensive defensemen on the team are out long term. But this could have been a much worse game, I thought. It got a little bit hazy towards the third period. They got outshot 9-16 by the Flyers. But they managed to weather the storm. I don't believe they had 1 goal in the second period, 1 goal in the third period. So, Scorsalo made 15 of 16 saves in the third period. So he really kind of held down the fort, especially when, losing Werenski early in the game and then losing Gudbranson. I think they lost Werenski in the first period and then they lost Gudbranson in the second period. And then in the third period, both Gavrikov and Blankenburg went down late in the third with either weird hits or things like that. It turns out that Blankenburg's got a broken ankle. Gavrikov appears to be okay. We're just going to knock on wood to make sure it stays that way. But for a team that was basically rolling 3.5 defensemen, I guess, for most of the second half of the game, Corpusalo, I thought, shut it down and did really well. In a minute, we have to talk about the injury news because there is lots of it. So that's what's coming up. In a minute, we're going to talk about what losing Werenski for the season means. We're going to talk about who else is missing, who's going to have to step up in this case. But first, I have to tell you all about BetOnline, because it is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer, esports, wrestling, UFC, boxing. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to Locked On Blue Jackets, I assume you love a sports podcast, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. And honestly, if you wanted to put some money on the Blue Jackets landing Connor Bedard at the draft this summer, that might not be a bad idea. So you can head to betonline.net on your laptop or mobile device to do that, or to just learn a little bit more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. So the injury list for the Blue Jackets just keeps getting longer and worse. They were already out. Sean Crowley missed the game. Jake Voracek missed the game, and Kent Johnson missed the game. Now, I believe that Kent Johnson is only dinged up, was, I believe, Brad Larsen's, the way Brad Larsen phrased it. Crowley and Voracek have both gone on injured reserve. I believe Crowley is day-to-day. Voracek is a little bit more long-term, I think, which, again, worries me. And then they also added defenseman Nick Blankenburg. He broke his ankle in the game last night. I don't know when. I don't remember seeing him go down. I know he got hit in the head. He got cross-checked by Ivan Provorov, and I thought that's what the injury was. But no, so he broke his ankle at some point in the game and then just continued to play on it, I guess. So he's out for 6 to 8 weeks, on top of Gudbranson, who had a really nasty, I think it was completely accidental. In the second period, I think he got knocked over by one flyer, and then another flyer just kind of accidentally kneed him in the back of the head and smashed him face first into the boards. There was a big line of blood running right down the middle of his forehead. He didn't go back to the game, I assume, because he's mildly to moderately concussed. Not on IR, so that's a good sign. But if he's not playing tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised. And they also announced that Zach Werenski suffered a separated shoulder and a torn labrum in the game. He's going to miss the rest of the regular season. I think it's 6 to 8 months recovery time for that. This is not the shoulder that he has previously injured on 2 separate occasions. I believe he had a couple of seasons ago, he had a torn labrum on the other shoulder. This is the second shoulder. This is the good shoulder, quote unquote. So really, really bad news. And the Blue Jackets have like 2 healthy adult defensemen at the minute. It's not great. They have recalled Gavin Bayreuther, Marcus Bjork, and David Jiricek from the Cleveland Monsters. Sorry to Cleveland, we've taken all of your defensemen. So we're going to talk about those guys in a little bit. But I wanted to I pulled up some stats on, or I was tweeting some stats on Locked On Blue Jackets, LO_Blue Jackets, because I was like, oh, it's just going to be Vladislav Gavrikov and children, and I was correct. So current healthy CBJ defenseman in games played, Gavrikov is leading the way with 217 NHL games. He has 128. Jake Bean has 123. Gavin Bayreuther has 72. David Jiricek has 2. And if Marcus Bjork draws into the game tomorrow, which I assume he will, that will be his NHL debut. So if you put all of that together, the average of like 90.3 career games per defenseman. If you add Gudbranson into that, he's got, I think, 654 NHL games. It goes all the way up to 170 games per defenseman on average of experience. Worrying. Not great. I don't like any of this. It really, really sucks to see, especially Werenski go down. I thought he'd been really good so far this season. Again, he and Nick Blankenburg, for my money, have been our 2 best defensemen. So to see them both go down in the same game for, a minimum of 6 weeks for Blankenburg and the rest of the year for Werenski, like, it really sucks. And when you add that to, Gudbranson missing a couple of games, I've been critical of Gudbranson, but I think he's looked better at the later games or the more recent games. He'll probably be back sooner than the other guys, but you don't want to mess with concussions. And frankly, at this point, we could just use a guy that has played in the NHL before. Add that to the fact that Adam Boquist is out with a broken foot, probably for another, I think, 8 to 10 weeks. I don't remember when he went down exactly, but there's a lot of things to worry about here. The Blue Jackets, who were already kind of shaky defensively, have gotten a lot weaker on defense. Like I said, Werenski, he plays a ton of minutes. He's pretty good offensively. He's fine defensively. He loves to make assists. He's decent on the power play and the penalty kill. It's, man, I don't know. It's just rough. Going down to 4 defensemen for the game, I was like, you know what? They've done this before. They can do it again. And then at the end of the game, or, this morning, I guess, when you find out, okay, Werenski's done for the season. I think last night, Brad Larson said, oh, it's not good news. Not good news at all for Zach. And I was like, oh, crap. I did think that separated shoulder might be on the list of possibilities, just looking at the injury. He hit his elbow off the lip of the boards, and I assume that what's happened is the entire joint has just fallen out of place, essentially. So extremely, extremely painful and disappointing, because he was having a really good game. I think he had 2 assists. No, he had a goal and an assist in the first period, and then obviously went down to injury. So at the players that the Blue Jackets have that are healthy in terms of defensemen, like, I'm looking at who needs to step up, and this is not a great defensive squad. I like Gavrikov a lot. I feel fine about Andrew Peak. Jake Bean has really been struggling this season. Maybe he'll pick it up with some more ice time. I mean, he doesn't really have a choice. Gavin Bayreuther has been only okay for the games that I've seen him play this season, and last season he didn't super impress me. So really what it comes down to is, can David Jiricek show them that he's NHL ready? I have talked to Rachel Donner yesterday of Locked On Flyers about this. I don't think he's NHL ready yet. I think his skating especially needs to take a big step forward, but he has the opportunity and maybe he can take it. The one that has really intrigued me actually is Marcus Bjork, who I really liked in the preseason, and he has really he's had a really good start to the season for the Monsters. I'm just trying to pull his stats up now. This is his first season with the Monsters. He's doing really well, and now he's kind of been rewarded. He signed his entry-level contract in May 2022, so I think he played maybe a couple of games last season, but this is his first real rookie season. He's got 5 points in 11 games so far. He's been one of their best defensemen, and I think he's been rewarded with a call-up, which is really great to see. However, he's very young, and I don't know that this is a tough situation for the Blue Jackets to throw him into. They don't really have a choice, but I think it's a really tough situation for him specifically, and also for David Jiricek. We're going to talk a little bit more about both of those guys in just a minute. That's what's coming up next on Locked On Blue Jackets. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jackets your first listen of the day. Now go ahead and make your second listen of the day Locked On Sports Today. From the games that mattered the most to the biggest stories in sport, you can go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So the biggest story of last night's game, obviously, was the defense injuries. So Blue Jackets have gone and they've called up basically every defenseman in Cleveland. I expected the Jiricek call up. He was, I think, the last guy to be called up when they realized that they were going to be down an extra defenseman. Obviously, putting Blankenburg on IR. Bjork was a surprise, but I'm not mad about it. I think he's been really good for the Monsters. I think he's earned a call up. Like I said, I think he and Jiricek, I think, have been their best defensemen. And pretty solid start to his professional career, I think. The one that confuses me is the Gavin Berry call-up, and I think it's very much a case of this feels like they need experience, and he's kind of the most experienced defenseman that they have that is not broken or already on the roster. He's got 72 career games. He's been with the Blue Jackets for a couple of seasons. They sent him to, Seattle picked him, and then he immediately came right back. He has 14 points in 72 career games so far. He's got 9 of those points in 53 games with Columbus, and he's got 4 points so far in 4 games with the Cleveland Monsters this season. Now, in a vacuum, I do not dislike this call-up. However, I am wondering if they have picked him over Jake Christensen just to have a little bit of experience, which is fine. I think if you're gonna call up Jiricek and Bjork, who have a combined 2 NHL games between them, then I think calling up Jake Christensen, who has 3 NHL games, for better or worse, you need a guy like Beyer to sit on that third pairing and just eat some minutes, if nothing else. And, he knows how the game works. He's been in the system for a couple of years now. He knows how that works. I would have liked to see Christensen get the call up, but I understand why that they've called Beyer up instead. All things considered, this is going to be a real test for the Blue Jackets. They play the Islanders tomorrow. The Islanders, who are doing pretty well this season. I believe they just lost to Arizona, which, there's no shame in losing. Well, there's quite a lot of shame in losing to Arizona, but you know what I mean. Blue Jackets did the same thing a couple of weeks ago. They're currently 9-6. They are 3rd in the Metro, especially after last season, which I think was a real disappointment for Islanders fans. I don't think that they got massively better over the offseason, but they seem to be succeeding. So I think that's going to be a really good test for the Blue Jackets to take their squad of baby defensemen out and see if they can make something happen against the Islanders. I would be surprised to see Korpisalo start, especially after his strong performance in Finland, strong performance against Philadelphia. You've got to put Elvis back in at some point, but right now I think maybe you just ride the hot hand, give Elvis some time away to kind of reset, rethink. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Islanders in tomorrow's episode. We're going to do a weekend episode because I'm going to sit down with Gil Munn of Locked On Islanders. We're going to catch up, see how the Islanders are doing, see what's giving them the most success, preview the game, and have some fun with it. So that's going to be tomorrow's episode. Thank you all for listening. That's going to be it from me today. I've been Jake Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the podcast at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms. And if you would like to chin me up by subscribing and boosting my subscriber count, that would help me out. If you hit subscribe, then you get notified when new episodes go live every day. So it helps you out. It's a win-win situation for everyone. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.